Yeah, hello guys. Welcome to a new session. And in the previous session, we actually spoke about how to actually group our routes. We spoke about how we can actually group routes into authenticated form. We also uh, kept some routes. We also spoke about how we can actually prefix our routes into different group. So if you have not seen that particular session, in order for you to actually get to this place, it will be right at the top hand side of the of your screen. So you can go back to actually watch that particular session. So for this session, our focus will be back to our functional requirements. And what we intend to do is we intend to implement reset password and forgot password. There are two forms in which they can use to reset their password, either when they are authenticated and when they are not authenticated. So the first one we are going to deal with is when the user is already authenticated. And the good part is we already created the handler in the previous session for them to be able to update their route when they are not yet, when they are already authenticated. And because we already created a middleware that we are using to actually get the authenticated user. So if you did not watch the part where we actually created the middleware for authentication of user, it will be at your screen on the upper right corner of your screen. So you can also go back there and see how we are authenticating users, and we are actually setting the currently authenticated user um, in the current context of the particular request in our application. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the code we are using to retrieve the authenticated user. So this is basically how we are getting the authenticated user, as we have already set it in our middleware. So going back to the auth handler, what we are going to do now is, since we already have the authenticated user, we need to create a way for them to actually supply their current password and the password they actually want to change to. And that is what we will be starting with. So stay with me as we move forward in this particular session. So the first thing, as we already seen that we've gotten the authenticated user, we need to create a request, just like we've been doing for any other part of our application that requires us to actually put in to accept a request from the user. So we are going to call it's also going to be a struct as usual, and the name of the struct will be change password request. And the change password request is basically going to contain the, we expect them to send us the current password. That is, because you are an authenticated user and expect you to actually know the password you actually logged in with. That is why we are requesting for the current password. And the next thing we are going to request for is the password. That is the new password they actually want to change to. And we'll be expecting it as a JSON tag. For those that do not know, it is basically my code editor that is helping me to do this auto completion based on other codes that we've actually written. Then we also need them to confirm the password, just like every other app we have. So we expect um, the confirm password attributes as well. And for the confirm password attributes, we don't need to attach the required attributes. All we need to state is that it should be equal to the field password, actually. So it should be equal to so the password must be equals to confirm password. That is all we need for the current password. Um, Yeah, so that is it for request for changing password. Then we are going to go back to the auth handler, and the first thing, as we always do, the first thing we are going to do um, is to bind the request to is to bind the request. So for this one, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it change. I don't want to put the password in the auth folder. I'm going to call it change password. And I'm going to move this particular function out of here and move it into the change password file. And I'm going to change this to change password. So I'm going to go back to the route and I'm going to register it as change password. Let me go back to the route. So I'm going to call it change password. It's just grammar. You can use updates, you can use change, you can use anything that you like. I just prefer to actually use this. So as I said, the first thing we will need to do is to bind the request. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a common method that we can actually use for binding requests. If we check our auth handler, you will see that we are constantly making use of this particular set of um, instruction. We used it here, we used it here, we are using it anywhere we are accepting requests. So that is why I'm going to create a method that we can easily use. And the function name, I'm going to call it bind body requests. And the bind body request will contain, we accept some parameter such as the current context and the request that is actually coming into the application. But for this, I'll call it payload. And as usual, it is going to actually return an error. So we are going to go to our auth handler and I'm going to copy this and paste here. Now, what will happen now is if any error occurs, during the process of binding, we want to send an error response. If there is no error, it will just be returned nil. So to this, I won't be sending the error from here. What I will be sending here is return. I was sending an HTTP. It will be errors.new, and I will call it failed to bind body. Right there, I'm going to attach the error that actually occurred. So I'm going to cut this out and I'm going to go back to the auth handler. And now here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to update this to handler dot bind body request. Is going to accept. Since we are not sending anything, we can remove this context now. Oh, we need a context actually. Sorry, we need a context. So let's go back to the auth handler and I'm going to update this, passing the context, and the bind body request will be the payload, right? Now that we have that updated, let us test it. Let's test our register user handler. I'm going to run the application. Just say make run dev. User declare but not used. This is being run from our change password handler. I'm just going to fmt.println user, and I'm going to restart the application. Now I want to try the register again. So as you can see, our request is being binded. So I won't wait too much time on that. So I'm going to copy this and move on to, so I'm not logging this anymore since we are already logging the error right here. Or I don't even need to attach, just fail to bind body, fail to bind body. make sure you are sending a valid body or a valid payload, right? So we are logging the actual error because I don't want to send the server rendered error itself to the client. So we are going to do the same thing we've done here. Then I'm going to come to the change password. So yes. So now the request we want to validate is the change password request. That is the request we want to bind, sorry. So after binding the request, we can then say that we want to validate it. Then after validation, we are going to print the user. So let's see. So I'm going to create another request. I'm going to call it change authenticated user password. And this will be a patch request like so. So localhost. So let's check what is our route. Route is profile slash change password. That will be API slash profile slash change password. Then we are going to hit the route. So we are not providing bearer token. Let's provide a bearer token and hit the route again. So if we look at our terminal again, you can see that the user detail is being printed. So that means the user is getting authenticated. But the one thing that I'm noticing now is our validation is not working. Our validation is not working. We should not be. So let me fmt dot print payload. Let's see what is going on. We are going to refresh the user. Oh, okay. We've not restarted the application before hitting that endpoint. So now that we've refreshed the application, we are getting that particular, the expected error, which the validation is now running. So we need to provide the current password like so. And we need to, so let me send an invalid JSON and let's see what happens. So you can see now failed to bind body. Make sure you are sending a valid payload. The request, the message we actually sent here is set here is now showing in our application. So we are going to, let's change this further. So let's send a valid payload. Let's call it password. Oh, password. We are expecting. Send this. We'll know what we are expecting. So we are expecting current password and password. Um, current password and password is required. So we need to fill this up. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see now that because we did not provide confirm password, we are getting an error message that confirm password field is equal field. So that should tell us something, that we also need to format message for that we are displaying for when we are validating with equal field. So we are going to go back to our validator right there in the auth handler. We are going to, in the change password handler, sorry. Let me refactor, rename this to auth password handler. And we are going to come in here. So now we need to actually update the validation message we are sending when the confirm password field happens. And how do we actually want to validate the complete password? So as you can see, my code editor is already setting the error message for me, which means key to title. That means the particular key, that is confirm password, must be equal to, but what we want to use now is must be equals to the param that we actually supplied in our validation. So if we check, equal field must be equals to password. So let's try that. Let's refresh our application now and rerun it. Let's hit the application now. So you can see now confirm password must be equals to password. But you can see the password is still in capital letter. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to make this to, I'm going to convert this to lowercase. Uh, String, how do we confirm to lowercase? Okay, strings to lower, correct. So I'm going to format this. I'm going to have this. Okay, it's already formatted. So we can send this. Let's refresh our application and send this again. Let's send this again. So we can see now confirm password must be equal to password. So we need to set the confirm password. Confirm password. Let's say, let me type some rubbish. And you can see we are still getting, but let me type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our request is actually going through now because the user data is actually nicely printed to the terminal, as you can see. So let's move forward. Now that we are change password and blah. Now that we are the parameter we are sending is getting validated. In order to change password, the first thing we must do is to actually make sure that the user that was retrieved right here and the password that is supplied, the current password that is supplied and the current user password is actually equal. And we did something like that during the process of logging in. So I'm not going to type that. I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to come to the change password and like so. So this time it will now be user.password. So if the password is not correct, we will then send a message stating that the password is not correct. So we say the supplied password does not match. That is, the supplied password does not match the current password, right? So the payload password, sorry, this will be current password. So if the payload current password does not match the current user password, we send a message stating that the supplied password does not match the current password or your current, let's say your current password. So, but if that actually goes through, we can then say, we can then change the user password. So for that, I'm going to go to the user service, our dear user service, and I'm going to create another method for changing user password. So function, I'm just going to call it change user password. And we are going to be expecting the we are going to be expecting the password, the new password, the new password, which will be a string, and the user itself, right? So in order to do that, all we need to do is say the first thing we need to do is hash the new password. And how do we hash the new password? We already did something like that there. And I'm going to copy that and paste. So this will be hashed new password, new password, and the hash password is what will be saving. So if this fails, we can just say password change failed. So if the password change does not actually failed, does not actually fail, what we need to do is say result, as usual, as we have been doing, user service dot db, sorry, user service db. Okay, I need to instantiate the user service. Okay, yeah, this is correct now. User service dot db dot so the method we'll be using this time around is user service dot db dot update this particular one. As you can see, the update method is expecting the column we want to update, which is basically the password column, and we want to update it with the hashed password. That's basically what we want to do. But before we can do that, we need to supply, it has to know the model it is actually performing the update on. So we need to say dot model, then we'll pass in the user model, which is this guy, user. I'm going to update it right here. It is expecting a pointer, but I guess the reason why it is not complaining is because we are already passing. Okay, we've not passed it in. By the time we pass it in, it is going to complain. So let's call that method. Let's say user. We need to initiate the user service. Auth handler. Just just like we've been initiating the user service, we need to call the user service. And so using the user service, we can also say user service dot change password, the new password, which is payload dot password, and the user model, so let's go back in there. So if there is any error, we want to print the error and we want to return a password change field. So if everything goes well, we want to return the user or I want to return nil. Although we don't even need to return the user for this, since we don't need a new user instance. So returning just the error is an error is enough, right? And return. So if everything goes well, we just return nil. The same thing goes to right here. So if everything goes well, we return just nil. And let's go back to auth handler. I mean change password handler. Then we get the response. We could call it response for this guy. So okay, sorry, we are expecting an error, right? So that's the proper listing. Error. So if error is nil, we want to return the particular error that we are actually sending from change user password. Otherwise, we are going to send return common dot send success, see context and a message stating that password changed successfully. And we are going to pass nil. We are not sending any data. So let's try this out. So let's change our password. That's right. So you can see now the supply password does not match the current password. And that is because during the process of registering our that particular user, the password we used was actually password. So let us, where is the route? Change password. This should be, let me save this. So it will be current password is password. Our new password is password 12345 12345. We send this in, so we can see then the password has changed. If we come back now to login with that password, you see now our credential is invalid. If we change it to 12345, you can see the user logged in, the password is now correct. So that is actually how we do change password for users that are already authenticated in the system. So how do we actually do for users that are not authenticated in the system? So the method we are going to make use of is using usage of OTP. We are going to send an OTP to the user email. Then using the OTP sent, we are going to validate the OTP against the user himself. Then we change the password. So this particular session has already gone beyond 20 minutes. I am trying as much as possible not to let every session go beyond 30 minutes. And I know that the reset and forgot password will actually take another 30 minutes or an hour. So which is why I'm going to be pausing this session. And we are going to continue the forgot and reset password session in the next session, right? So I hope to see you in the next session where we are going to be moving to how we are actually going to change password for users that are not authenticated in the system. So to go through this one more time, we retrieve the authenticated user, we binded the request we binded the client request by retrieving after binding, we validated the payload sent to us. Then we compared if the client password, the current password, let's say compare the client's current password with the hashed password. Then also we then initialized the user service. Then inside the change user password, we hashed the newly sent password. Then we updated the newly sent password with the newly hashed password. So that will be the end of this session. Please share with your friend, family, people that you know are interested in Go or in programming language already, or your bank, especially your backend or front-end colleagues that are interested in backend. Please subscribe, hit like button to actually give me more reason to actually create content like this and also to encourage me. Thank you very much. See you next section.